I think we're probably ready to start. And I also wanted to make another comment about Kevin's performance. Those of you in the audience who are dancers, as a dancer, being in this milieu, in this very sort of cold room, which they are, probably dancing not on a sprung floor, with no ambient lighting, it's a real challenge, and I think he was quite amazing. So, it's now my task to introduce the panel we're going to hear from tonight. We're going to hear from a broad variety of individuals from a range of disciplines, dance, multidisciplinary, and music, and from a variety of cultural backgrounds. They will share their very personal experiences with cultural pluralism in Canada, particularly in Ontario and Toronto. Barriers, successes, challenges, lessons learned. The intricacy of the funding sector. What works and what hasn't. What are the roadblocks? I am so pleased to be here. Well, I am president of the Canadian Conference of the Arts, and Charles, you've made me past president, but believe it or not, I'm still chair of Artscape in my volunteer life. I'll be retiring soon. And in my working life, I've managed a cultural grants program of one type or another for probably 20 years. The current program I manage, the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund, has as its mandate cultural tourism. And it's our job to find new festivals and events across the province that have the potential to attract tourists and new visitors. And while I'm not here to plug my program, for any of you who may be doing things that you think could be eligible, after class, I'd be happy to give you my card. We know that visitors to Canada are looking for authentic and unique cultural experiences, and that they are particularly interested in Aboriginal culture. That means that my program must respond to any and all events that may have tourism potential from all cultures and all disciplines. And we know the community cultural demographics change dramatically from community to community across Ontario. Because the program is not meant to provide sustaining support and is for standalone projects only, we are lucky enough to have the flexibility to support cultural festivals on their individual merits. And I know it's much more difficult to achieve that goal within operating programs managed by our major funders, some of whom are here tonight. The reality is, though, the performing arts in Toronto and Ontario reflect the population base, and as funders, we must find ways to support new artistic expression. After all, cultural pluralism is a term that is used when smaller groups within the larger society maintain their unique cultural identities and whose values and practices are accepted by the wider culture. So I think that's what we're here to talk about tonight, and how we do that, and maybe how we do it a little better. Now I'd like to introduce our panel for this evening. Each member will speak for about 15 minutes, and then we will go into an open mic forum to get the conversation moving. And I may, as chair, take the liberty to pose questions myself. I think that's what I get to do tonight. And around 9:15 or so, Charles will take the floor, summarize and wrap up, and provide us with information about tomorrow. So, our first panelist this evening is Ajay Heble. Ajay is a professor at the School of English and Theatre Studies at the University of Guelph, and is founder and artistic director of the Guelph Jazz Festival, and is currently engaged as project director for improvisation, community and social practice, a large-scale, multi-year, multi-institutional research initiative funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Ajay.
Thanks very much, Kathleen, and thank you, Charles, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to use my comments today to talk to you about music curation and arts presentation as a form of community-based education and activism. As the artistic director of the Guelph Jazz Festival, an arts organization that's dedicated to presenting innovative jazz and cutting-edge music, particularly improvised music, I've become increasingly aware of the ways in which the choices I make about which artists to program, what context to put them in, and so on, ought to be understood not only as programming matters, but rather as pedagogical acts, that is, acts which frequently question static relations of power, which seek to build alternative visions of community and social cooperation, and which often explicitly set out to challenge taken for granted assumptions. Programming decisions, in short, involve choices that are connected in complex ways, complex and important ways, to broader struggles over resources, identity formation, knowledge production, and power. In that context, festivals such as mine and others might purposefully be considered as opportunities to recast the histories, the identities, and the epistemologies of diverse and often marginalized peoples, and to promote counter-narratives that invite and enable an enlargement of the base of valued knowledges. In today's talk, I'd like to open up consideration of the extent to which the act of music curation should itself be understood as a form of pedagogical activism. Our programming and choices and omissions as arts presenters are not neutral expressions of meaning. They inevitably and necessarily reflect some kind of interest, whether it be racial, sexual, national, and so forth. I want then to make the case that as arts presenters, we have to learn to see our work as being concerned with more than just programming. There's a lot more at stake. While it's impossible to predict the exact outcome of the work, or to know in advance whether it's going to have the kind of liberatory effects which I hope it will, it is my belief that the community-based work of cultural institutions, such as music festivals, can occasion a purposeful disturbance to orthodox habits of judgment and response. And as a presenter of improvised music, my work, at least as I see it, is largely about creating new knowledges and new opportunities, about generating alternative ways of seeing and indeed hearing the world. This commitment to an activist pedagogical approach to arts presentation as a vital social purpose enterprise mandates fresh new ways of thinking about programming. Approaches that involve a willingness to take risks, to resist orthodoxy, to shake listeners, and indeed to shake ourselves out of settled habits of response. As presenters working with improvising musicians, I want to suggest that we are uniquely positioned to cultivate purposeful resources for listening, to provide our audiences with encounters that encourage them to hear the world anew. At issue, if we take seriously this notion of arts presentation as a form of community-based practice that can and does lead to social change, is the need to create more equitable and non-market-driven structures of inclusion. Now, taking such a challenge seriously, I would contend, means a number of things. It means attending rigorously to matters of diversity, for example, gender, race, and sexuality, not only in terms of the artists we present, but also at the level of our audience members, our boards of directors, our staff, and even our sponsors. We need to think of the presentation of improvised music, in short, as an opportunity to radicalize public understanding. In this presentation, then, I'd like to talk about the role that arts presentation can play as an important part of that process that I'm calling the radicalizing of public understanding. I'll do so by using as my point of departure two related areas of inquiry. One, programming, and two, audience development. And of course, they're linked. I hope through our conversations today also to encourage us, and perhaps we can do this more during the question period, to reflect on some of the questions that the organizers of this town hall have asked us to consider. What are the challenges in promoting cultural pluralism in performing arts organizations? What needs to be done in building the curatorial capacities of performing arts organizations so that they are more aware of the cultural values of performers from culturally diverse communities? As I've noted, our festival from its inception has sought to be somewhat distinct in its artistic vision. Rather than trying to offer a something for everyone type of approach, which is in many ways a kind of strategy that's advanced by many of the other festivals in the region and even in the country, rather than using that kind of something for everyone approach, in Guelph, we focused our efforts on a very specific mandate, that is the presentation of innovative forms of jazz and creative improvised music, and to present that music both to community audiences who are new to the music in Guelph, but also to audiences who travel from far and wide to hear the music. We have a large international audience that comes year after year from all over the world, from Europe, from across